young girl from a quiet Idaho town left for school one morning and never made it back home. Her disappearance shattered her parents' world, leaving them in a fog of unanswered questions and quiet heartbreak. But 2 years later, something strange happened. Her mother zoomed in on Google Maps and saw something she couldn't ignore. The soft afternoon light slipped through the curtains of a modest Airbnb in a sleepy New York suburb. Rachel Warren sat on a worn sofa, her laptop open in front of her, eyes heavy from the long trip. At 36, she looked like someone who had been carrying invisible weight for far too long. 2 years of it, to be exact. "Yes, we just got here," her husband Daniel said quietly into the phone, pacing the small living room. At 39, the lines on his face had deepened, each one carved by sleepless nights and false hope. "We're ready to speak with the detectives." "Yes, we can head over now." Rachel barely registered his words. Her focus was on the screen as she typed in the address Daniel had just repeated. Google Maps loaded slowly, displaying a route from their Airbnb to the police station. "They're expecting us in an hour," Daniel said, running a hand through his graying hair. "I'm just getting familiar with the area," Rachel murmured, zooming in on the map. They had never been to New York before. Their home was Pine Hollow, the kind of town where everyone waved to each other, kids biked to school alone, and things like this just didn't happen. Until they did. 2 years earlier, their daughter Eugene disappeared after a church class. She was last seen crossing the street with friends. And then nothing, no trace. That moment split their lives in two, before and after. Since then, every lead had been a cruel tease. Every call from a stranger carried both hope and dread. But this new tip was different. It had been specific. Someone claimed to have seen a girl who looked just like Eugene at a charity event near Bryant Park. It was the first tip in months that felt grounded enough to follow. So they packed up, left Idaho behind, and flew across the country, not knowing if this would bring them peace or more pain. Rachel's eyes lingered on the digital map. She zoomed in near Bryant Park and noticed something unexpected. "There are so many churches around here," she said quietly. A small comfort. She hadn't wanted to miss service while they were away. Daniel didn't respond. Once deeply rooted in faith, he had distanced himself from church life since Eugene vanished. The kind words, the stares, the empty phrases had driven him away. Rachel had done the opposite. She'd leaned into prayer, into structure, into something to hold on to when everything else was falling apart. "I booked us for 2 weeks," Rachel said softly. "We can extend if we have to." Daniel sat beside her and glanced at the screen. She showed him the map, the station, the park, nearby churches. "We've got a good place to start," he nodded. "Let's check the street view." He took the laptop and dragged the blue figure along the streets near Bryant Park. They looked at the park itself first, then moved through the side roads. "That's Mole Street," Rachel noted, pointing at the screen. At the end of the road was a small church. Daniel zoomed in closer. And then she saw it. A girl in a pink hoodie walking beside a man, their backs to the camera. Rachel leaned forward sharply. "Daniel," she whispered, pointing. "Look!" The hoodie, the small detail on the back. It was the same one Rachel had bought for Eugene's 11th birthday, just weeks before she vanished. That design was burned into her memory. "Try to turn it." "See their faces?" Daniel clicked, trying different angles. But as always with Google Street View, faces were blurred. They were visible in only a few frames, all from the back or at vague angles. "Something about that man," Rachel started, her voice tight. Daniel exhaled. "Rachel, you've seen so many girls in pink hoodies these past 2 years. I get it. You want this to be her. I want that too. But we can't jump every time we see a pink sweatshirt." Still, Rachel marked the spot on the map, then closed her laptop. He was right. They had to be careful. But they also had a lead, a real one maybe. something that pushed them forward again. "Let's go," Daniel said, grabbing his coat. "The station's waiting." "We're not wasting this chance." The police had granted them permission to put up missing person posters, and with an officer assigned to assist, they were finally heading toward Bryant Park. Rachel gathered the stack from their suitcase, each flyer showing Eugene's bright eyes, her long hair, that unforgettable smile, and the details of her disappearance. After 2 years of handing out these posters, Rachel had memorized every word, but even now, her determination hadn't wavered. She couldn't let it. As they loaded into the car, Rachel couldn't shake the image from Google Maps, the girl in the pink hoodie on Mole Street. Deep down, she kept coming back to one thought: a mother knows. A mother always knows. Navigating the unfamiliar New York streets, Rachel followed the GPS's blue line while Daniel sat beside her, flipping through their compiled case notes. "Turn right at the next light," the voice instructed. As they slowed at the intersection, Rachel looked to her right. "There," she said, pointing. "That's the park." Even in the late afternoon, Bryant Park buzzed with life. Kids playing, couples wandering, and near a small gazebo, what looked like a neighborhood gathering, just like the tip had described. Rachel's grip on the wheel tightened. Every instinct screamed at her to stop the car, to get out and scan every face, call her daughter's name until her voice cracked. "We'll come back," Daniel said gently, sensing her hesitation. "Doing it on our own might not get us far. Let's wait for the officer." Rachel nodded, though her heart pulled in another direction. They were about to take the next turn when she saw the street sign. Mole Street. Without a second thought, she flicked on the signal and turned. "Rachel, what are you doing?" Daniel asked sharply. "That's not the way." "I just want to stop by the church," she replied, eyes fixed on the road. "Just for a moment." Daniel frowned. "Rachel, I know you. You're not going there just to pray." "I do need to pray," she said, but they both knew it wasn't the full truth. "There's no service right now. You know that. You can pray in the car. God's not limited to church walls," Daniel said, frustration creeping into his voice. "You taught me that." Rachel said nothing. She was scanning the sidewalks, hoping for a flash of pink, a glimpse of something, someone, familiar. "You're going there because it's where you saw her," Daniel said finally. "You think she'll still be there, but Rach, that image was from an old street view." "I know," she said softly, "but something's pulling me. I can't explain it." Daniel studied her expression, saw the quiet resolve in her face. After 2 years of grief and dead ends, he knew when it was time to push, and when to let go. The church appeared at the end of the street, a humble brick building with a white cross over the entrance. Rachel pulled into the near-empty lot and turned off the engine. "I'll wait outside," Daniel muttered, stepping out. "I'll call the officer and let them know we'll be a little late." She watched him walk across the lot, his shoulders slightly hunched under the weight they'd both carried for far too long. They used to move in step, finish each other's sentences. Now, more often than not, they moved like two people caught in the same storm, just trying not to drift too far apart. Rachel grabbed her purse and the small Bible she always carried. Eugene's name embossed on the cover, a gift from her 10th birthday. The leather was worn, the edges softened by countless sleepless nights and whispered prayers. As she approached the church door, a strange sense of peace and tension coiled in her chest. She didn't know whether it was a higher power guiding her or just the relentless pull of a mother's hope, but she wasn't going to ignore it. She stepped inside. The cool interior welcomed her like an old friend. The air smelled of candles and wood polish, the stained glass windows casting warm colors across the pews. She paused to let her eyes adjust. Near the front, a man, maybe in his 50s, was quietly cleaning, wiping down pews one by one. No service was in session, just as Daniel had said. Rachel walked forward, her footsteps soft on the wooden floor. "Excuse me," she said gently. The man looked up, offering a calm, curious smile. "Hello there, can I help you?" "I hope so," Rachel replied, pulling out her phone. "I'm looking for someone. I saw this image recently. It's not very clear, but maybe—" She brought up the saved Street View photo, the blurred figures, the pink hoodie, the man beside the girl. The man took the phone and squinted, studying the screen closely, his brow furrowed. "It's hard to tell with all the blurring," he said, "but there's something familiar about them." He handed the phone back slowly, and Rachel's heart skipped a beat. "Do you know them?" the man asked, glancing again at the screen. Rachel hesitated. She wasn't sure how much to reveal to a stranger. "I'm looking for my daughter," she said quietly. "She's been missing for 2 years. I follow every lead, no matter how small." The man's face softened with sympathy. "I'm so sorry to hear that. He didn't get to finish. The door at the back of the sanctuary opened, and 2 men stepped out, deep in conversation. Both wore clerical collars, clearly pastors. Rachel's breath caught as her eyes locked on the second man. She recognized him. "Thank you," she said quickly to the staff member, then made her way toward the ministers. The man in the formal robe noticed her and offered a kind smile. "Good afternoon. Can I help you?" "Yes," Rachel said, extending her hand. "I was just admiring your church." "Pastor Graham," he introduced himself, shaking her hand. "I'm the senior pastor here, and this is Evangelist Matthew. He's been preaching with us the past couple of weeks." Rachel's voice caught as she repeated the name. "Evangelist Matthew." He looked at her, puzzled for a moment, then gave a polite smile. "I'm sorry. Have we met before?" She took a step closer. "Rachel Warren, from Pine Hollow, Idaho. I work at First Protestant Church there. You came to preach a few years ago. I was the one who coordinated your visit." She smiled gently, trying to help him remember. "I arranged your stay, helped with the Sunday program. You led a prayer group. There was an altar call. A woman in a wheelchair stood up. People talked about it for months." Recognition flickered in his eyes, or at least something like it. Yes. Rachel Warren. Of course." He smiled broadly. "That was a powerful weekend. The Lord's hand was truly present. I meet so many faithful people during my travels, but the faces sometimes blur together." Rachel nodded, understanding. A traveling preacher like him probably visited dozens of congregations every year. "Are you based here now?" she asked. "Just a guest," he replied warmly. "Tonight's actually my final service before I head out, flying overnight." Rachel smiled faintly, though a question pressed at her. Was this really coincidence? Or had someone, led her to this very place? "A strange twist of timing," she said. "Indeed," Matthew agreed. "But what brings you all the way to New York?" Rachel's smile faded. "My daughter, Eugene, she went missing 2 years ago. It happened not long after your visit to our church." She reached into her bag and unfolded a poster. Eugene's photo staring back, full of life. "We got a tip. Someone said they saw a girl who looked like her near Bryant Park. My husband and I came right away." Matthew looked at the photo. His face didn't move at first. Rachel couldn't tell if she was imagining it, but he seemed to stiffen, just slightly. Pastor Graham stepped forward and gently placed a hand on her arm. "I can't imagine what your family's been through. Let's take a moment to pray." The 3 of them formed a small circle. Pastor Graham took her hand, and after a slight pause, so did Matthew. The pastor led a heartfelt prayer for Eugene's safety, for strength, for guidance. When they finished, Matthew stepped forward and embraced Rachel. It felt kind at first, but then the hug lingered, just a second too long. His arms tightened, and she felt him inhale, as though breathing her in. Rachel froze. Something about it felt off, not like the reassuring hug of a pastor, more like someone clinging, too personal. too close. As he pulled away, Rachel caught a flash of something in his breast pocket, a photo just barely visible through the fabric. The image was turned inward, but the paper was thin, and the outline looked like a young girl. Before she could react, Matthew adjusted his jacket, noticed the edge of the photo, and quickly pushed it deeper inside. "A picture of my daughter," he said smoothly, giving her a soft smile. "I carry her with me everywhere." Rachel nodded, though her mind was already racing. The silhouette in that picture, it felt too familiar. "We'll certainly lift Eugene's name in prayer tonight," Pastor Graham assured her. "The more eyes, the better." "Thank you," Rachel said, steadying her voice. "I should go. My husband's waiting. We have an appointment with the police." As she stepped away, a cold sensation crept down her spine. Something about Matthew's reaction to the photo, that strangely intimate hug, and the picture in his pocket, none of it sat right. She didn't want to jump to conclusions. He was a respected evangelist, a man known in churches across the country. But as Rachel stepped back into the sunlit street, one thought refused to leave her. What if this wasn't coincidence? And for the first time in weeks, she was afraid she already knew the answer. No matter how irrational it might have seemed, especially to Daniel, Rachel couldn't ignore what she'd felt in that church. She spotted him sitting in the rental car, the driver's side door open to catch the breeze. His expression was stormy, and she braced herself for the frustration she knew was coming. "What took you so long?" Daniel snapped the moment she approached. "You've wasted half an hour. The police are waiting for us." Rachel slid into the driver's seat but left her door open. "Daniel, you're not going to believe who I just ran into. Evangelist Matthew, the same one who came to Pine Hollow right before Eugene went missing." Daniel barely reacted. "There's something off about him," Rachel said, her voice dropping, even though they were alone. "When he hugged me, it wasn't normal. He held on too long, like he was, I don't know, smelling me or something. And he had a photo in his pocket. Just for a second I saw the shape of it. And Daniel, it looked like Eugene." Daniel started to respond, but she cut him off. "I know how it sounds. I know. But I'm not making it up. When I showed him her photo, he froze, just for a second, like he recognized her." He studied her face now, her urgency softening his reaction. "Look," he said carefully, "you and I both know how respected preachers like him are. If you're wrong, this could cause serious damage. You have to be sure before you accuse someone like that." "I'm not accusing him," she said firmly. "But something isn't right." Daniel sighed, rubbing his temples, clearly torn. "Let's just go to the station. The police are waiting. If you still think something's off, we'll talk to them there. Let them take it from here." Rachel nodded slowly. "You're right. We'll ask Pastor Graham for Matthew's full info later, with the police involved." But before they could get any further, the church doors opened again. Evangelist Matthew stepped out, saying a few words to Pastor Graham before turning toward the lot. He waved at them cheerfully as he headed to his car, parked right next to theirs. Rachel didn't wave back. She was frozen. As he opened his door, a warm scent spilled out of his car. A soft, sweet vanilla fragrance. Rachel's stomach dropped. She knew that scent, knew it instantly. It was Eugene's favorite, the one Rachel had given her for Christmas. She wore it every day, called it her grown-up perfume. No one else would recognize it like her mother did. Matthew backed out of the spot, offering one last polite wave before pulling into the street and disappearing down the block, completely unaware that he'd just torn open something Rachel had barely held together. "Get in," she said, her voice sharp now. "Shut the door." Daniel climbed in, startled. "What is it?" "Didn't you smell it?" she asked, already turning the key in the ignition. When he opened his door, that vanilla, that was Eugene's perfume. Daniel blinked at her, unsure. "Rach, vanilla is everywhere. Air fresheners, candles, body spray. It could have been anyone's." "No," she said, gripping the wheel hard. "It wasn't generic. That was hers. I know it. Daniel watched her, concern creeping into his features. You're chasing something invisible here. Rachel pulled out of the lot. I'm following what I feel. Something's not right. And you're basing that on a smell? Daniel said, exasperated. Come on, Rachel. This is how people get swept up in emotion, not logic. She didn't answer. Not at first. I'm not chasing shadows, she said quietly. I've worked in ministry long enough to tell when something's off with someone in a collar. I don't claim to be a prophet, Daniel. I'm a mother, and I feel something I can't ignore. Daniel turned away, folding his arms and staring out the window. Do whatever you want, he muttered, but don't come crying to me when it leads nowhere. Rachel didn't respond. The car was quiet as they turned onto Mole Street, heading in the same direction Matthew had gone. Her heart beat like a drum. This could all be a mistake. She could be chasing nothing. But what if she wasn't? What if this really was it? She kept a safe distance behind his car, careful not to draw attention. Daniel sat stiff beside her, arms crossed, his silence louder than words. And still, all Rachel could hear was the whisper in her chest, the one that had never steered her wrong. Don't stop now. The tension in the car was thick enough to cut with a knife. This is ridiculous, Daniel muttered after several silent minutes. We can't call the police with nothing but your gut and a whiff of vanilla. We're wasting time. Just bear with me, Rachel whispered, her eyes never leaving the evangelist's sedan. If I'm wrong, I'll never pull something like this again. They trailed his car into a quiet neighborhood, one noticeably more upscale than where they were staying. The houses were larger, the streets quieter, the yards carefully trimmed. Eventually, Matthew pulled into the driveway of a well-kept two-story home with a garden out front and an Airbnb sign by the curb. Rachel continued past slowly, then parked around the corner where they could keep watch without being noticed. She turned off the engine. Now what? Daniel asked, arms crossed, clearly running out of patience. Now, we wait. They sat in silence, watching. Minutes crawled by like hours. Then, the front door opened. A woman stepped outside, mid-30s, hair in a tidy bun. She hauled 2 full-size suitcases into the trunk of Matthew's car. Then she returned inside, only to reappear with a 3rd suitcase, smaller this time, child-sized. Rachel sat up straighter. He said he was flying out after the evening service, she murmured. Why pack now? The woman disappeared again, then came back to the doorway, this time with a young girl. Blonde pigtails, maybe 8 or 9 years old. The girl gave Matthew a quick kiss on the cheek. He leaned down and hugged her in return, smiling. Rachel's breath caught. Her heart leapt, but as the girl stepped into view, Rachel's hope shattered. It wasn't Eugene. The face was wrong. The build was smaller, the features unfamiliar. The age didn't fit. Daniel exhaled softly. That's his daughter, just like he said. Rachel's chest caved inward, her hope deflating like air from a balloon. She had been so sure. I'm sorry, she whispered, eyes stinging. I really thought... Daniel placed a hand on her arm, his voice gentler now. You're a mom looking for her daughter. No one would blame you for chasing something that felt real. Rachel nodded, silent. The vanilla scent, the photo in his pocket, had she just imagined their meaning? Was this all grief twisting her senses? Let's switch seats, Daniel said quietly. I'll drive us to the police station. They stepped out and traded places. Rachel sank into the passenger seat, worn out by the whiplash between hope and disappointment. Daniel started the car, but didn't move. Set the GPS, he said. I have no idea where we are. She pulled out her phone, fingers mechanical, eyes blank, and typed in the address. The blue line reappeared, directing them back toward their original plan. The station, the detectives, the real investigation. As Daniel pulled away, Rachel looked back one last time. The house disappeared behind them, but something inside her twisted, a weight she couldn't name, like a puzzle piece still missing, like she had overlooked something important. Still, she had to let it go, at least for now. They needed help. They needed to speak with the people who might actually have the tools to find Eugene. Rachel rested her head against the window, watching the city drift by. 2 years of searching. 2 years of hoping, begging, praying, of leads that turned into dust, of people smiling kindly while silently thinking she should move on, but she couldn't. Not ever. Something inside her still pulsed, quiet but relentless. Call it faith, call it instinct. It had carried her across the country, and it would keep her moving, no matter how many dead ends it led her to. Because a mother never stops. Never. She stared ahead, lost in thought. Then, something. "Look," Rachel said suddenly, pointing. "They're turning." Daniel sighed, glancing toward where the other car was heading. It had pulled into a small park, a playground with a cafe nearby. Kids ran around behind a chain-link fence. Rachel spotted the woman from earlier, helping the little girl out of the car. "Slow down," Rachel urged. "Please, just for a second." "No," Daniel said, more firmly this time, pressing the accelerator. "No more detours. We're late, and we're going straight to the station." Rachel twisted in her seat as they drove past, straining to see through the fence. The woman was greeting another adult. The child ran off to join a group of kids waiting by the swings, and then the scene vanished behind them. Rachel slumped back in her seat, another thread of hope snapping quietly inside her. "Daniel, I'm sorry." But he cut her off. "No more," he said, and this time there was no softness in his voice. Daniel's hands were clenched around the steering wheel, his knuckles pale from the pressure. "We need to learn from this, Rachel," he said finally, voice tight. "Instincts can mislead us. They make us connect dots that don't exist." Rachel didn't respond. He was right, at least in theory, but she couldn't shake the feeling. The scent in that car, the photo in Matthew's pocket, the odd timing, the suitcases, it all meant something. She just couldn't prove it. Not yet. The car rolled forward in heavy silence until Daniel's voice softened. "I know how badly you want to find her. I do too. But we have to stay grounded. Work with the police. Stay focused." "I know," Rachel whispered, her eyes fixed on the passing streets. When they finally reached the precinct, they were nearly an hour late. Inside, the lobby buzzed with voices and phones. At the front desk, Daniel approached the officer. "We had a meeting scheduled with Detective Morris about our daughter, Eugene Warren. We're late, I know." The officer typed something into the computer and gave them a polite but regretful look. "I'm sorry. The detective's in another meeting now." He waited for a while but had to move on. Daniel turned and looked at Rachel. No words, just disappointment etched into every line of his face. "How long until he's available?" Daniel asked. "Could be a couple of hours," the officer replied. "You're welcome to wait or come back later." Daniel gave a stiff nod and gently guided Rachel back outside. "See what happens when we go off track?" he said quietly. "We wasted time." "I'm sorry," Rachel murmured, and she meant it. Daniel sighed. "There's a diner across the street. I haven't eaten since this morning. I bet you haven't either." "You go ahead," Rachel said. "I need to clear my head. Walk a bit." "I saw some interesting architecture nearby." He paused, clearly debating whether to argue or let it go. "Take your phone. I'll text you when the detective's ready." Rachel watched him cross the street, the burden of 2 years of loss visible in the way his shoulders slumped. Guilt tugged at her, not just for the delay, but for the hope she'd let flare and fall. But even now, something deep inside her refused to let go. She started walking, letting her feet guide her while her thoughts raced. The city bustled around her, but it all felt distant. She opened her phone and returned to the same blurry Google Maps image that had started it all. The girl in the pink hoodie, the man beside her. She zoomed in again. The posture, the way he moved, it looked just like Evangelist Matthew. Acting on instinct, she tapped a number from her contacts. "Melissa," answered a familiar voice, a fellow staff member from her church back home. "Rachel, is everything okay? Did you find Eugene?" "Not yet," Rachel said, "but I need your help. Do you remember Evangelist Matthew? He came right before Eugene went missing." "Of course I remember. He led the healing service. I need you to dig up everything you can about him. Seminary records, background checks, church affiliations, and the woman in the wheelchair who was healed. Do we still have her contact info?" "I think so," Melissa replied. "I'll check the archives and call you back. What's this about?" "I don't know yet," Rachel said truthfully, "but I saw him here in New York, and something feels wrong." "Be careful," Melissa said, "and call me the moment you know more." Rachel ended the call and slipped her phone into her bag, now hyper-aware of her surroundings. She passed a series of buildings before one caught her eye, a large structure with a sign that read, "Lutheran Dormitory." A wide yard stretched alongside it, dotted with old trees and benches. She crossed the street for a closer look. Lutheran dorms weren't common, not like Catholic ones. Curious, she took out her phone and snapped a few pictures of the architecture to pass the time. But just as she approached the main entrance, she froze. A car pulled into the parking lot. Matthew's car. Only this time, he wasn't the one driving. Behind the wheel was the same woman Rachel had seen at the Airbnb, and in the passenger seat, the same little blonde girl. Rachel ducked behind a nearby shrub, heart thudding. The woman stepped out and left the door open, standing beside the vehicle as if waiting. Moments later, a woman in a Lutheran habit appeared, leading a small group of children toward the car. Each child had a suitcase, nearly identical to the one Rachel had seen earlier that morning. Rachel counted 5 of them, all between the ages of 7 and 12. And then, like something out of a dream, it happened. One of the children, lagging slightly behind the others, turned her head just enough for Rachel to catch a glimpse of her face. Her breath caught. She couldn't speak, couldn't even move, because in that moment, she wasn't guessing. She knew it was Eugene. It felt like an answer to every desperate prayer she'd whispered in the dark. Rachel stood frozen, her breath caught in her throat, heart pounding wildly. That face, older now, changed by time, but it was her, the shorter hair, the slight dimple, the eyes. She would know them anywhere. It was Eugene. For a few long seconds, everything around her disappeared. No sound, no motion, just that overwhelming, paralyzing recognition. Her hands shook as she reached for her phone. "Rachel?" Daniel answered on the first ring. "Daniel," she gasped, barely able to form the words. "I found her. It's Eugene. I'm looking at her. I'm sure it's her. She's with that woman from earlier. Get the car. Get here now. I'm sharing my location." "What? Where?" "She's getting into a car. Please call the police and come now." Rachel hung up and shared her location, but she didn't wait. If that car pulled away, she might lose her daughter again. She stepped from behind the bush and sprinted into the parking lot, calling out with a voice filled with urgency and hope. "Eugene! Eugene!" The woman near the car froze, alarm flashing across her face. She quickly herded the children into the vehicle, slamming doors, trying to shut it all down before it began. She gave a quick nod to the dormitory keeper, who looked on, visibly confused. Rachel reached the car just as the engine started. She banged her hand on the window, eyes locked on the little girl in the back seat. Eugene turned, startled, confused. Then her eyes lit up with recognition. "Mom?" she said, her voice small and trembling. "Is that Is that really you? Then she turned to the woman driving. Did God make my mom alive again? Before the driver could respond, Rachel had the back door open and was gathering her daughter into her arms. Her tears came hot and fast as she held the child she hadn't touched in 2 unbearable years. "It's me, baby," she whispered, choking on the words. "I've been looking for you every day." The dormitory keeper stepped forward, clearly startled. "What's happening? Who are you?" "This is my daughter," Rachel said, clutching Eugene as if she might vanish again. "She was taken from Idaho 2 years ago. We've never stopped searching." The woman's face drained of color. "These children, they're part of Pastor Matthew's ministry," she said weakly. "He told us they were orphans." Before Rachel could respond, the sound of tires screeching announced Daniel's arrival. He leapt from the car, eyes scanning frantically, and then he saw them. "Eugene!" he shouted, his voice cracking. She turned at the sound, stunned. "Dad!" He ran to them, throwing his arms around them both, overcome with emotion. "You found her," he whispered. "You actually found her." But the moment shattered again as the woman in the driver's seat closed her door and began speaking rapidly into her phone, clearly calling someone, probably the evangelist. Her movements were rushed, hands shaking. She reached for the ignition again, trying to leave with the remaining children still inside. Daniel broke from the embrace and stormed toward the hood, slamming his hand down. "You are not driving away," he barked, face flushed. "Stay right there." And then, sirens, wailing in the distance, growing louder. Within seconds, multiple patrol cars converged on the parking lot. Officers spilled out, weapons ready, voices firm and commanding. "Police, everyone stay where you are." Daniel raised his hand slowly. "My name is Daniel Warren. That's my wife, Rachel. We just found our missing daughter. She was taken 2 years ago. That woman," he pointed to the driver, "she's involved." The officers moved fast. They removed the frightened children from the car, gently helping them out one by one. The dormitory keeper, clearly shaken, tried to comfort them as best she could. "She says she's the evangelist's assistant," one officer informed Rachel. "Claims the kids are part of a church outreach program. Not his children. They stay here during his ministry tours." Rachel held Eugene close. "She's our daughter," she said. "And if these other kids are like her, they may have families out there too." The officers exchanged tense glances and nodded. "We'll need to take all of you in, get this documented and verified." Medics checked the children as arrangements were made for transport. None of them appeared injured, but all looked confused, some too quiet, others too scared to speak. "We'll notify child services," one officer added, "but we need to locate this so-called evangelist." "Where is he now?" an officer asked the assistant. He's at the Airbnb," she stammered. "He said he'd meet us after the evening service. I was just supposed to drop the kids near the airport." Rachel stepped forward, her voice clear. "He told us he was flying out tonight, but he lied. I saw him hours ago. I knew something wasn't right." The officer gave a curt nod and turned to his team. "Get a unit to that Airbnb. Now." "We're coming with you," Daniel said firmly, his arm wrapped protectively around Eugene. The officers agreed but clarified that the family would need to stay in the back of a patrol vehicle for safety. Eugene refused to let go of her mother, holding onto Rachel like a lifeline, afraid this miracle might vanish if she blinked. The other children and the dormitory keeper were escorted into separate vehicles, all headed to the station. As their car pulled away, Rachel clutched Eugene close, tears still streaming silently. After 2 years of aching silence, of unanswered questions and fading leads, her daughter was here, alive, breathing, real. When they arrived at the evangelist's Airbnb, the property was already surrounded by flashing lights and marked cruisers. Officers moved with precision, From the back seat, Rachel watched through the glass as Evangelist Matthew, or the man they had known by that name, was led out in handcuffs. Their eyes met for a brief, icy second. Rachel's skin crawled. As he was placed into the patrol car, a photo slipped from his pocket and fell to the pavement. An officer picked it up and brought it to Rachel and Daniel. It was a portrait of Eugene. There were more photos, other children too. At the station, Eugene was gently interviewed in a soft-lit room designed for child witnesses. A female officer stayed with her while Rachel waited nearby, eyes glued to the glass panel in the door. Her phone buzzed, a missed call from Melissa. She stepped into the hallway and returned the call. "Rachel," Melissa answered quickly, "I've been trying to reach you. I found something serious. That man, the evangelist, he never graduated seminary. The credentials he sent us were fake. We never verified them because everything looked official." Rachel closed her eyes, already suspecting what was coming. And the woman in the wheelchair from the service, the one who was supposedly healed, she never came back. I think that whole thing may have been staged. Rachel's voice was steady, but low. "We found Eugene, Melissa. She's with us. She's safe." "Oh my God," Melissa whispered. "But what does that have to do with—" "He took her," Rachel said. "He took our daughter. And there were other kids too. They're still sorting it out." There was a long pause. Then, "Rachel, I did some digging on the name I found in the records. Derek Lanton." Rachel repeated it under her breath, the name tasting like poison. "He's been using that fake identity for years, under different names, in different states. Fraud, false ministries, manipulation." Rachel's blood ran cold. "He used the church, our church, to get close to vulnerable families." "You couldn't have known," Melissa said gently. "None of us could." But Rachel felt the weight of it. After ending the call, she looked up the name herself. The face staring back at her in the search results was unmistakably the same one she'd shaken hands with in Pine Hollow. A face that had fooled entire congregations. A face now linked to multiple aliases and a trail of destruction. Back in the family room, she shared everything with Daniel. "I feel responsible," she admitted, voice tight. "I was the one who checked his credentials before inviting him. I should have seen through it." Daniel took her hand. "This is not your fault. These people are master manipulators. He knew exactly how to act, what to say. You followed every protocol. And when the system failed, you still found her." Rachel nodded, wiping away another tear. Before either of them could say more, the door opened and Detective Morris stepped in. Tall, composed, mid-50s, his tone calm but steady. He gave them a slight nod. "Mr. and Mrs. Warren," he said as he sat, "I just want to say how rare and how extraordinary this outcome is. Most cases like this don't end the way yours has." He looked to Eugene, who stood beside him, clutching a small cup of juice, still too stunned to sit. "She told us everything," he added, "but she's asked to tell you in her own words too." Rachel opened her arms and Eugene ran to her, settling beside her as the room fell silent. "I was walking home after the baptism class," she said softly. "My friends turned the corner, and I was just a little behind. That's when he drove up." She glanced at Daniel. "He told me you'd both been in an accident, that you died," he said. "He was sent to take care of me." Rachel's heart shattered all over again. "He took me to a funeral," Eugene continued. "There were pictures of coffins, of you. I believed him." Her voice broke as she looked up at them. "He said the only way I'd see you again was in heaven. But I never stopped praying. Every night, I asked God to send you back." Rachel pulled her in tighter. "He didn't hurt me," Eugene added quickly, "but he kept us in that place. Said we were part of God's plan. that we were there to test his faith. He made us call him Father Matthew. We'd play games, but we weren't allowed to talk about our families. Detective Morris took over. His real name is Derek Lanton. He's a predator who's hidden behind church titles for years, using them to get close to children. What he did wasn't just illegal, it was a betrayal of trust and faith. He paused. But you broke that chain. You found her. Rachel nodded, her eyes locked on Eugene's. We're never letting you out of our sight again, she whispered. And for the first time in years, her daughter smiled, tired but real. He moved children between churches under different identities, Detective Morris explained calmly. All signs point to forged credentials and years of deception. We'll be conducting a thorough investigation. What happens next? Daniel asked, keeping his arm around Eugene, who hadn't let go of him since they arrived. We've arrested the man known as Evangelist Matthew. His real name is Derek Lanton, along with his assistant, Carla Benson, Morris said. They're facing charges for kidnapping, fraud, identity theft, and endangering multiple children. Rachel's thoughts turned immediately to the others. And the rest of the children? We're working through national databases and contacting families as we speak, Morris replied. They came from various states across the country. It may take time, but we're doing everything possible to reunite them with their families. Your daughter is incredibly lucky you found her. After the interviews concluded, the family remained in the private room, reluctant to leave the safety and warmth of that moment. Daniel turned to Rachel, his voice low. I need to say something. I'm sorry for doubting you, for calling your instincts a distraction. I was wrong. Rachel gave a quiet smile, touched by his honesty. We can't lose faith just because one man used the church for darkness, she said gently. Not every shepherd is a wolf in disguise, and in the end, it was a church that led us back to Eugene. A soft knock interrupted them. Pastor Graham stood in the doorway, his face worn with sadness. I hope I'm not intruding. Detective Morris nodded for him to come in. I wanted to speak with you directly, Pastor Graham said, stepping forward, hands clasped, to say how deeply sorry I am that this happened under our roof. We had no idea. None. We've canceled tonight's service, he added, out of respect. Rachel looked up at him, and surprised even herself. This wasn't your fault, Pastor. He deceived everyone. Just then, commotion outside the room drew their attention. Through the glass, they saw officers escorting Derek Lanton across the station. He glanced in their direction. His eyes met Rachel's. There was nothing behind them. No fear, no remorse, just emptiness. Pastor Graham broke the silence again. If you're staying nearby, we'd be honored to have you join us next Sunday. A special prayer service for Eugene. And if you feel ready, perhaps your story could help give others hope, especially those still searching. Rachel looked at Daniel, who nodded gently. We'd be honored, she said. Truly. After all, it was a church that helped to bring our daughter home. That night, back at their Airbnb, Eugene lay curled between them, sound asleep. The kind of peaceful sleep Rachel hadn't seen in over 2 years. She watched her daughter's chest rise and fall with every breath, brushing a loose strand of hair from her forehead. Her heart felt heavy with gratitude. A single tip, she murmured. A blurry image on a map. A hunch I couldn't explain, and it brought us here. I'm sorry I didn't trust you sooner, Daniel said quietly, not wanting to wake their daughter. When you saw her on Google Maps, when you insisted on following that car, you were right all along. Rachel smiled, not with pride, but with quiet knowing. Faith takes many forms. Sometimes it means believing in what you can't see, and sometimes it's about trusting what your heart knows, even when no one else does. Daniel reached across Eugene and took Rachel's hand. My faith was stretched to its breaking point, he admitted. I thought I'd lost it entirely. "But not completely," Rachel whispered. "You stayed, you searched, you hoped. And that's what mattered." They sat in soft silence, listening to Eugene's gentle breathing. Neither spoke, but both were deep in thought about everything they had lost, everything they had found, and the invisible threads of hope that had carried them through it all. A journey marked by grief and grace, by fear and fierce love, and a family once broken made whole again.